Shalom and welcome to People on the Path. My name is Adam Lowy, and I am the Lifelong Learning Moreh Derech at Congregation Beth Sholom in San Francisco. Each month, I will welcome dynamic guests to discuss, learn, and consider what it means to be on the path. How does an individual's choices impact their path? How do the various communities that an individual participates in change their lives forever? What unsuspecting moments became the powerful ones that inform personal and professional journeys? Where does one's relationship to their Jewish identity take surprising turns, and how does it spiritually manifest? I intend for the conversation to be intimate, unscripted, and informal. The possibilities and potential will be infinite. The directions, ways, and paths will be explored, discovered, and open. Let us please take a walk together on this month's People on the Path. It has become tradition for me to check in with our senior rabbi, Rabbi Dan Ain, before I introduce our guests. So, Rabbi Ain, this is that time of the month that we look forward to. As always, thank you for being a part of this program.
Do you use beard product? Is there beard product that you, because that's like a nice full, do you use product?
I condition the beard. I don't use any post.
Makes a difference. You can tell. It really does make a difference, especially.
But thank you. I do groom it purposely for these recordings because the beard represents something for me. But that's a different conversation. I want to ask you, Rabbi Ain. I feel like every time we have one of these, I ask you a question about how you're doing, and I know. This is not easy times. So I wanted to ask you, how are you? When our guest and I got on right before you joined in, she said she was having a bit of a funky day. And I totally agreed that it's funky is just in the air. So I wanted to ask you, how are you? Can you believe summer's almost over and that the high holy days are less than a month away?
Okay, well, I'm prepared for the high holidays. That's the only thing I think I am prepared for, is I am ready for the high holidays to come. My mother had hip surgery yesterday, so she's in the hospital. Thank God she's okay. My father has got some medical issues. It's been really hard. It's been a tough season. I know other people are battling with health issues as well. And, especially being far away from family, which I know people are experiencing now, to try to be in touch with loved ones. It continues to be a real challenge during this time period. But, on the flip side, we had 25 people for Minyan at 7:15 this morning in person. And that felt like the healthiest thing that I've done in a long time. And, I think as we move into Elul, I've been teaching Rabbi Lou's teaching, which is just beautiful. And so every Wednesday at noon, you can hear some of my attempt to bring Rabbi Lou's Elul and High Holiday teachings, not as a memory, as something in the past at Beth Shalom, but alive as a part of our congregation. And if you have missed those are on our YouTube channel. People are ready for this. People are ready to do teshuvah. I think people have had a very hard year. And as a result of that, people have done things that they feel bad about.
Yeah,
myself included.
Yeah, so, I feel like the pandemic's been one long tshuva. That's something that I've kind of been thinking about. Is like I feel like it just keeps putting us in these moments of having to do really deep introspection, reflection. And
it's become so hard because the reason the Minyan is so healthy is because when you see people and fully embodied and fleshed human beings, we remember that we're human beings and we connect to each other with all of our senses, and it becomes a lot harder to fight, argue, that beautiful humanness that allows people to stay together even when they have disagreements. When that's stripped and the only thing you're left with is the disagreements, the humanity is lost. And I think we're experiencing a lot of that, and I think we all have some teshuvah to do for it.
Well, I'm excited for today's guest because she brings her full self. She brings all of her senses And I think even in this format, we're going to get a chance to be energized, to be a bit of to find some light in the midst of all that's going on. So thank you, Rabbi Ain. I will
Yeah,
bring
and I
you
just
back.
want to say about the guests that you have. You know me, I'm not going to not say a little bit about the guests that you have coming up. I won't spoil it, but I mean, if you want to think, the only word I have for this guest is vibrancy. And this is a person who is completely alive with everything that she does. And that vibrancy has filled many congregations and many kihilot in the Bay Area. And we are blessed to have her affiliated with ours. So I look forward to hearing her stories. You know, the thing about her is that she's so much focused on helping other people and doing work to repair the world that I really don't think I've ever heard her story. So this will be a treat for me. So I look forward to it.
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to it, and I will bring you back in a bit because I know you'll have some hot questions to pose to our guests. So here is my formal introduction, and our guests. You can turn your camera on. It is my honor to welcome this month's guest, Marilyn Heiss. Marilyn grew up on Long Island in a predominantly Jewish area called the Five Towns. Marilyn's family attended a conservative synagogue where her parents were active members. Her shul did allow bat mitzvah for girls on Friday nights, and Marilyn had her bat mitzvah on June 16th, 1967, the week after Israel's Six-Day War. Marilyn liked being in shul, often getting up on Saturday morning and walking to attend services while her family stayed home. Marilyn was really drawn to ritual, but since she could not participate fully, once she completed high school, her Shabbat attendance was over. Marilyn attended the State University of New York at Binghamton, leaving after 2.5 years. She took a secretarial course and in November 1975 started working at NBC in Manhattan. Marilyn became a video editor working on news, sports, promotions, and entertainment shows. In 1986, Marilyn moved to San Francisco to live with her boyfriend, now her husband, Ken. Marilyn freelanced as an editor for 30 years, garnering 2 Emmys for work done for Sports Channel Bay Area. When Marilyn arrived in San Francisco, she had no connections to the Jewish community and realized that if she wanted to do Jewish, she would have to create the rituals. Marilyn created her own Haggadah, hosting Seders, and Hanukkah football open house parties. In 1997, Marilyn began practicing yoga, leading to a meditation practice, which led to an independent study of the weekly Torah Parsha. Marilyn found herself at Or Sholom, which was at the time a Jewish renewal community. She saw women reading Torah and immediately knew that is what she wanted to do. A few years later, Marilyn found a monthly Saturday morning service called the Circle Minyan held in the Beth Sholom school building, where she learned to chant Torah. In 2000, Marilyn met Rabbi Lou and became a Shabbat regular at Beth Sholom. She regularly chanted Torah, joined the ritual committee, worked with B'nai Mitzvah families, and became extremely involved with ritual life. Marilyn was the director of Makor Or from 2003 to 2005. In 2011, Marilyn attended the first Friday night service for The Kitchen, eventually becoming their quote-unquote ritual maven. Marilyn now describes herself as a professional Jew, a transmitter of Torah and traditional Jewish prayer, helping people connect to the practice of Judaism. Marilyn, welcome. welcome to People on the Path.
Happy to be here.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I've gotten a chance to know you over the last 1.5 years in various formats, and I think the community is going to be amazed and thrilled to hear a bit about how you got to become the ritual maven, how you got to become a transmitter of Torah and traditional Jewish prayer, all from that beginning part of this bio, which is, does not necessarily point to that's what you're going to be up to these days. So, Marilyn, first of all, just give us a little bit. How are you doing? How are you maintaining right now in the world?
You know, as you and Rabbi Ain said, it's a tough time. And so, there are days that are better than others. So there's that. Where I am today is kind of somewhere in the middle. I'm happy to be here. This kind of raises my spirits a bit. So that's kind of cool. I will also put a little different twist on what the two of you discussed, is that not only did people find, some people found tshuva this year, but I think also there was room this year for a lot of growth for people. Because people were forced into figuring out how to deal with things when there aren't distractions, when there aren't things going out, where they can't go and do, and everything's happy. And then all of a sudden, they have to create their own stuff and make things happen. And I think a lot of introspection, which is part of that tshuva, but it, but encompasses a little bit more than that, I think. So I actually, besides being worried about, the pandemic and what's happening and where that's going to go for our world, there are a lot of parts of this coming out of it that I feel very positive about, because I think that we are ready to recreate things in the world, because we've actually realized things that in a real deep way that need to be fixed. And I think in the Jewish world and the Jewish 21st century world, I think that we're really ripe for change that can really happen and has been accelerated. I think the ship had to be changed from 20th century to where we're going to go in the 21st century. Yeah. And I really think that there's an opening for us to really do this. This is one example of that.
Yeah. So Marilyn, I think that knowing what I know about you, that you've been kind of ripe for change from the get-go. And so I think I totally understand how you are picturing this from a positive perspective, and I appreciate that so much. And I'm going to take it with me in my work moving forward. Sometimes I resist the change. I wish it wasn't happening the way it's happening and the pace that it's happening. However, your perspective on that change is really a great one, and so thank you for sharing that. And I want to just kind of like dig in a little bit. People on the path in general is less about what you're doing today, but more about like, how did you get to this part of where you are today? And I think in the bio it stated just some of your kind of initial, what I would say is probably not being a traditional young girl. And this time of in the 1960s, of somebody walking to synagogue by herself, leaving her parents at home. And so what do you think like you were looking for as a kid, that what kept bringing you to the synagogue without your parents, and when you could have been doing all kinds of other things, I'm sure, with your Saturday morning?
Thanks. And that's a really interesting question, because I don't know that I've ever questioned the why of what I did. I often talk about that I did this, that it was strange that I did this as I look back onto it. If I think about it now, I think there's a couple of things. I was definitely drawn to the language of the Saturday morning service and the prayer and the tunes, even as they were those mid-60s, very New York Ashkenazic tunes that so many of us grew up with. But I loved that, that music and that language, I think, always hit me. I really did love Torah from the beginning. I only have some memories of, like, I know that I opened up my Hertz Gumash and followed really carefully and really focused, because what may sound shocking, but even though I went to Hebrew school, they did not teach us Torah. Mm-hmm. We did not learn Parsha HaShavua. We did not, there's many things that when I think is shocking. Mm-hmm. In prayer, I remember saying to Rabbi Lou that I grew up, they told us there were no angels in Judaism. And Rabbi Lou looked at me and said, Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. It's all over the liturgy. How could you not think about that? And I had to question, I don't know. Mm-hmm. But it was a time when people were very afraid of assimilation. Yeah. And so I just, for me, I just love this stuff. And I will also say, I loved being the skinny little girl going there and sitting with all the elder men, who most of whom were Holocaust survivors. Because I used to go at 9:00 to start, or whenever it started, because remember, it's baby boomer time. Often there were 3 bar mitzvahs in one day. They actually had 3 people and split them up and did weird things. So before the bar mitzvah people came, I wanted to be there to get that early. I mean, I'm still a Bazooka Gazimmer person. I still love those introductory prayers. I love that warm up. So there was something that drew me there that even now, I have to say, I don't have a really good answer. It just really touched me.
Yeah, I mean, something pulled you. Something literally, like, somehow it pulled you towards there. So what did your parents think? I mean, they were active members of the synagogue, but they weren't going regularly. So what were they thinking when you took off on a Saturday morning?
Obviously they knew I was going. They were happy about it. It was a connection. It was a connection that I had very much so. There was no reaction at all. It's Saturday morning. Marilyn gets up and walks to shul. I mean, I will tell you even weirder than that. Because my family was not Shomer Shabbos. We did whatever on Saturday. There were many Shabbats that I actually went back from Mincha Maariv, which is really weird because besides being not a bar mitzvah yet, but even if I was, I wouldn't have counted. But there were and I had a couple of buddies. They were boys. They were my age. And we would just go back. Maybe it was the pickled herring, right? Because we had the actually sheet. It was pickled herring. I love pickled herring. I don't know. I went back for those services.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had a neighbor who would drive me sometimes because he was saying Kaddish, that he lost a parent. So it's really very interesting that the shul, the temple, the synagogue, was very much a place that touched me. And I do not know why. It really does makes me reflect on how that influences my calling now, which I feel I have. Right. So it was apparent early. And I don't know, part of me looks now and says Hashem was talking to me. I don't know. It's a very Joan of Arc moment.
Yeah.
But something drove me there.
Yeah. So Marilyn, so you were involved as much as you could in the late 60s, early 70s at the synagogue that was claiming basically egalitarianism relatively, but it was still fairly traditional as far as you didn't count in a minyan. And so I think in your bio you said that basically when you finished high school, you kind of left the fold in a certain way.
Well, but before we skip over, what I was very lucky and blessed is that while I lived in a community, I mean, again, it was the mid 60s and, there was no egalitarianism. I mean, men and women sat together in a conservative synagogue, but, all I ever wanted was an aliyah. I could never get one. But I did have, we did have youth group. We did have connections. And I was lucky to have. There was a community Hebrew high school. It was an after school 4-year program that I and a lot of my friends, we were all in youth group together. We went to this after school, after bar mitzvah school. And we had some amazing teachers who taught us out of the box. And some of them were very orthodox. I remember them so clearly. I teach some of their teachings now. An orthodox teacher who would play Zathspos Zarathustra and ask us to connect that to prayer and what does that make us feel? To talk about, you go to the Louvre and you think you're in the Louvre and you turn out it's a movie set. Was that experience real or not? Did you really see the Venus de Milo and Mona Lisa, even though it was replicas? I mean, those kinds of things, that's the way they taught us Judaism. So the fact that I remember that so clearly, that it was part social, and that was my social life was, high school friends, and many of them were also in youth group, and many of them were also in this Hebrew high school. But I also got a lot of teaching. So I have to give honor to that.
Yeah. But
then when that was done, it was done. I mean, I went to college, it's easy to be Jewish in New York. It's easy when your family's there and everyone's Jewish and everyone knows, and the place closes down on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So people who don't live in that environment, as I found out later, it's a different experience.
Yeah.
So even though you leave the fold, you don't really leave the fold.
Right. Because you could always, you basically were going back home for all your Hagim, and you knew kind of what you were getting into. Were you able to? Did you explore any kind of Jewish life when you were at college? Were you trying to create anything there, or you just were like?
Obviously I did not. And I have to say, it's shocking to me that I find out now that the school that I went to now has one of the best Jewish studies departments in the country. And I'm kind of shocked that I don't know if that didn't exist then, but I was like, how, like, if it did, I don't know how I did not know that. I did not. You know, I just didn't. I didn't need, again, my Judaism was assured.
Yes. Yeah. Did you feel like your parents, you know, besides being active members, do you feel like that they were kind of living and discussing and actualizing Jewish values in the home?
Not specifically. You know, I mean, we were Jewish, we were, you know, we followed the traditions, we, you know, but no, we didn't have the discussions on that level. Mm-hmm. You know, in that way. I mean, again, my parents, you know, we would go to programs. They, again, were active in shul when there are things like something like this, so it would be live, you know, but not really. It was just something that you accepted. There was no deepening.
Did you have somebody in your kind of immediate or, you know, kind of extended family that was the deepening for you, that you could have these conversations with? Was it a grandparent? Was it an aunt, an uncle? Was there anybody? Or was this kind of just the beginning of Marilyn finding her path?
I think youth group did that for me.
Yeah.
Actually, I mean, I was very lucky also to be in a time, I mean, USY, we met once a week, and some of it was, you know, playing pool or just hanging out. But some of it, that's where those discussions went. And again, you have to remember, this is the late 60s and early 70s. There's a lot going on. Yeah. I mean, I can remember coming home from USY the night of the first lottery for draft, you know, and just very, you know, oh, like, you know, I have an older brother, and it was like, oh, you know, what number was Michael? And everyone looked at me and said 18, you know, so, you know, a really high, you know, a low, high number, however you want to look at it. So there was a lot going on. So we discussed those things. Mm-hmm. We talked about, and I, you know, being involved in USY, I went to keenuses, I went to, like, you know, groups at other, you know, at other synagogues. I went to conventions, you know, and we talked about those things there. That's where I got a basis in that. But again, I'm the wrong gender. So while I was involved in those discussions, there was a, you know, and that was good. When it came to the ritual stuff, I'm a girl.
Yeah. Yeah. So then you went to New York City. You got yourself into the video editing industry. You sounds like you embraced it.
Path as well, but yes, I mean,
it sounds like you embraced it, and somehow through that you met your future husband.
I did, amazingly enough, to think about that, who I met and how I met him. Yes, because he was only there for a short period of time.
And it was enough, though. The love was enough that you decided to come to San Francisco, to leave all your roots behind, to leave the 5 cities. I mean, the 5 towns. I think you called it the city earlier when we were having a conversation, and you went across the country. I think you had a moment, probably, that you realized all these things that, whether you were taking it for granted or not, might be extreme, but something that you just knew was always there was all of a sudden not there, and it forced you into what did that force you to do? Because, you know, all of a sudden you had to find Jewish community.
Yes, I mean, I arrived in April 1986, and Passover came, and I just, like, it's Passover, and that was the first jolt, because the first jolt was it's Passover, and I've got no place to go. I've got no connections. I had one friend who was Jewish, and I eventually, like, went to her high holidays with the grandmother years later. But I had no connections. Amazingly, it didn't even dawn on me to think to look for a synagogue. Mm. And what also I think needs to be remembered is that San Francisco Jewish life in the 80s, when I got here, was very different than it is now. It was very much, I used to describe it as, there are a lot of Jews in San Francisco and nobody wants to admit to it. Is the way I used to put it, because I mean, there was nothing in the papers. There was nothing happening. You'd go to a grocery store. There was no Passover aisle. No one was talking about it. It was really weird to me. And in that moment, when I realized that I just lost that Passover, it was the first Passover in my life, in my entire life. I was 32 years old, 31 years old. And it was the first Passover. I never Seder. And that was the jolt for me. And I realized in that moment, the year I missed it, that the next year that was not going to happen. That it didn't matter what I did the rest of the year. It didn't spark me to start looking for Jewish things. I had just arrived. I was in a new job. I'm like, I've just moved in with my boyfriend who yes, I've been commuting for a year and a half, and I'm now, after 8 years of living alone, I'm living with someone and they're not Jewish. So there's that. And I had other things to deal with, making friends, do whatever. But I knew that the next Passover, that was not going to happen.
And so you wrote your own Haggadah. You ended up, well, how many people were at your first Seder?
The first Seder was 11 in our apartment. It was a traditional Seder. It was supposed to be like 10, and then someone called and said, my friend doesn't have a place to go, and of course you're like, gotta, as Larry David says, you gotta go. It says you gotta invite them. And so it was 11 people who, a lot of them I worked with. And I said, okay, and I knew they were Jewish, and I'm like, okay, I'm having a Seder, you want a deal? And they came, and it was my first Seder on my new little Mac. And 1987, and I put together kind of, as well as I could, a Seder that I led for it was the first time I ever led a Seder.
Did you like print it out on one of those spool printers, or like how did that?
No. What did I actually? That one I still have it somewhere. That one I actually went to a printer and had it spiral bound.
Oh, nice.
The next year when I wrote the next one afterwards, I would just have them printed up. But yeah, no, I had that one printed. It was kind of important to me. It was very groundbreaking for me.
Yeah. So you mentioned that your husband wasn't Jewish this is going on, and your husband's not Jewish. What was like? How was he feeling about it? And was he supportive? Was he? What was going on between that dynamic as you're trying to like build Jewish community for yourself in San Francisco?
I am also very lucky and blessed in that regard, because it was, Ken, I used to, when my parents were beating up on me that I was going to live with someone who was not Jewish, and it was like, what religion is he? I know he's Catholic. I don't, what is he? And I'm like, he's a spiritual kind of guy. He doesn't believe in organized religion. I don't know what his parents are. I found out later he was an altar boy when he was very young because his mother was Catholic, but, he was supportive. He understood this was my thing. He helped me, put the table together and do the thing. He has done many things since then. That was never, quite frankly, it's never been an issue, ever. That this was my thing. And
So Marilyn, at this point, did you realize that you were trailblazing? Did you realize that were you conscious of the fact that you were leading people?
That first year, no. That first year was like, I needed a Seder. And so I put one together. That was year one. What came out of that is where it really started, because 3 of the people who were at that Seder were clients of mine who became friends, who had their video, they had a video stage, actually where Mission Cliffs now is on Harrison Street. That is the site of these infamous Seders that I had. They had their offices there, and they had a video stage to shoot videos. They did a lot of corporate work and educational work. And so the next year, they said, oh, let's do a Seder. You want to do a Seder here? And that started a string of about 10, 11 years of community Seders. I do want to give a shout out that there were community Seders in another video facility years earlier that I did not know about. And the place was actually called One Pass Video, and it was and they used to call it the One Passovers. but I was not connected to that world at that time. They were like, let's have a Seder here. And as soon as we opened it up, and what we did was we opened it up first to the people who worked there. You didn't have to be Jewish, but if you wanted to come and you were working, you could be there. And then it just kind of got extended of people found out there was this Seder going on in the world. And so we started that year. It was potluck. It was held on the Saturday of Passover because it was just easier. It was families, I have kids who grew up with that as their Seder. And we set a cap at 50. So we even had a waiting list. It was kind of amazing. And it was potluck. So I would do like a turkey breast and the brisket and maybe the soup. And I would, wherever I was working, because I was freelance for like the weeks before Passover, I'd be faxing recipes all over the Bay Area. Because I had them all on my computer. I'm like, and they're like, it was like, I can't cook. Okay, cucumber salad, you can do this. Do you know how to bake? Okay, can you whip egg whites? I mean, I like kind of like really curated it up as much as I could to a point, but everyone brought stuff.
So Marilyn,
and it was fascinating to see, I have this fantasy. I mean, there were kids. I mean, I used to take the kids to open the door for Elijah. And, these kids it was their tentative thing in Judaism. Like their families really didn't do it. This was their connection.
Yeah.
One girl once said to me, "Oh, Marilyn, when you opened the door, I felt the spirit of Elijah come in." What more can I ask for? I had this fantasy that Nico, who was like, it was not even Jewish, half Japanese, half American, whatever, that, he meets, like, has a girlfriend who's Jewish, and they go, "Oh, you obviously have never gone to a Seder." And he's like, "Oh, no, I went for years." Because he was my best reader, so he could read the 4 questions.
So Marilyn, like, so to go from what you were experiencing in Long Island to all of a sudden, like, creating ritual for many, many people, like, were you ever like able to step out and be like, wow, I'm doing all these things that I wasn't allowed to do in New York, or just like, what was that like? How was it feeding you? Because in the meantime, this wasn't your profession. You were still working. And so like, how was it feeding you? And like, how did that kind of like, how did you balance it with your profession, and when did you start to like move into, I can potentially make this part of like actually what my living is?
At the time, part of it is it just came out like I wanted a Seder and this is what it is and how great it is. And again, I'm giving it in the same place that my clients are, right? I mean, the same thing with Hanukkah football. Come have latkes. When I was in New York, I once worked with friends on video greeting cards, and we did a story of Passover. So I would play that at halftime. And then we'd answer questions. I do a little teaching at halftime. Again, did I really acknowledge that this is what I was going to do as a profession? No. I just thought, like, how great this is. I can do this. People are coming in. I always loved having rookies. We always had the rookies light the candles at the end. So to be able to share this and to bring this to my San Francisco community in different ways, some to Jews who, like me, had nowhere to go, because San Francisco is that kind of town. A lot of people did not have families to go to, and didn't think about it, but I did. So I guess the spark is that I was like, well, I have to have this. And then, but I didn't ever think of it as a profession. I just was like, well, I have these 2 things, and that's what it is. So no, in the years that I did that, and I was very proud of my Haggadah. I actually made one version that incorporated the story of my father's family, because I had that, and I just told the story of the family with that. So that's what it was. It was just being able to create a space for that.
Yeah. So eventually you made your way to formal institutions like Or Sholom, and then you found Beth Sholom and Rabbi Lou. Tell us a little bit about that time, about when you met Rabbi Lou, and about kind of the place the place and the space that he began to fill in your life.
Yeah, well, I first want to give a shout out to Beth Sholom, because I will say, and not to diss any other place that I've been, Sholom was wonderful because actually Ken found it, I have to admit right now. So he has got my husband. He's the one who said, look, there's a synagogue over there. But I will say that, and they held Circle Minyan, an alternate once a month service in the school building that was lay-led. So that was also a very important entrance, because there I was with these like-minded Jews who were creating somebody else who was creating a space.
Mm-hmm.
And I had at that point, because of my yoga practice, was turned on, like I read yoga philosophy, which brought me to Jewish philosophy, because I'm like, these are the same. There's so many crossovers. And I started doing more research and finding places where I can learn about the Torah portion. And I got to delve into my feminist side and get all the Jewish, Deborah Golda and Me by Letty Cotton Pogrebin was formative for me.
Mm. Reading
that book and seeing what her life was like and finding all these things. And so, the story, it's very simple. I mean, January 1st, 2000, the millennial was Shabbat. It was Shabbat Shemot. I knew this at this point. It was all self-study though. A little bit of Sholom, but all this was self-study. And I decided when I was 12, I decided I needed to be in synagogue that day.
Mm.
And so I went to Beth Sholom because I knew Beth Sholom because I went to Circle Minyan there. And I knew it was a conservative synagogue. And I did not know about Rabbi Lew. And I showed up that day and I just felt like I came home.
Mm.
It was a space that felt familiar. It was a service because I grew up in that service. And I always loved that service. And my Hebrew, I never lost the ability to read Hebrew. And and the tunes were the same. I mean, it was just amazing. And again, there's Rabbi Lew. And I don't even know if that day it was just him. I think actually it was the place in the service that day, because I don't remember like his, teaching being mind-blowing, which it probably was. But I just remember I felt like I came home. Mm. And I literally, from that day, went the next week back to Beth Sholom. And I'm talking 9 o'clock in the morning, Pazukei to Zimra. I was there for and services at Beth Sholom those days were 3:15, 3.5 hours. And I was there for the whole thing. And like in my youth, I even, I used to go back from Mincha. I mean, it was crazy. But I went the next week and the next week. I picked my seat.
Yep.
I mean, it just called to me and the community.
Yeah.
The Beth Sholom community, in that time, and, I think now as well, there's something about people who really embraced traditional Jewish ritual practice and love to sing. And that's what I love about prayer. It's not about the prayer leader, not in the synagogue that I grew up in, and not really Beth Sholom, even though there's a chazan, there's a cantor. It was about the people.
Yeah.
And then, again, there is Rabbi Lew that eventually it's like, wow, Rabbi Lew, and he would give these, these sermons that were mind-blowing. And that was when also January 2000 was when he started Makor Or.
Mm-hmm.
He and Norman Fisher started Makor Or that month.
And you already had a meditation practice of your own at that point?
Well, I had a yoga practice.
Yeah, yoga practice.
I didn't have a meditation practice yet. I took yoga. I started yoga after I spent some time in Tassajara just as a guest in the Zen Center. I used to just go for for a week's vacation kind of thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But I took yoga so I could meditate, because I'm too really, Marilyn. I mean, I am a very kinetic human being. And to figure out how to quiet my mind.
Yeah.
And yoga did give me that space. I hadn't found a meditation practice yet. I did go to a Jewish meditation conference, but I didn't find that practice until Makor Or. And there was Rabbi Lew, who founded Makor Or on the principle of bringing, spiritual and meditative practice to normative Jewish practice.
Mm.
So I watched as he had Makor Or, he had, Shabbatons, he had, a Sunday, events. I don't know how many of those I went. I kind of dipped in through that first year.
Yeah.
And then January 1st, 2001 was when he, before that he announced it, he decided to start a 9-month practice period that was going to be an intense, commitment to meditation and prayer and physical. I mean, you had to be there.
Yeah. Marilyn, when do you feel like Rabbi Lou recognized you, like in the community, as somebody that I need to get her more involved? Because I think we've had a conversation offline that he was kind of instrumental in adding you to the lay leading experience. So when did that happen? How did that happen? And how did that make you feel at that point?
It happened pretty quickly. I mean, again, as people know, at the time I did have, pink highlights in my hair, and I obviously was a little bit from another planet. I also, as I pray now, I prayed then with my whole body and with my whole soul. And I sing really, really loudly, because that's I think that's one of the things, actually, if I think about it, why I went when I was a kid. Because you can sing really, you're supposed to like sing and belt it out. That's the whole deal, right? Goldie Rassin, Zichronah Livracha, she sat in front of me when I picked my seat, and she had to move behind me. She turned to me one day and she said, "Marilyn, Moshe Rabbeinu can hear you." And I was obviously really involved in prayer. And again, the Beth Sholom service gave space for that. And I didn't go with anybody. You have to remember, I just went. Ken obviously didn't come with me. I didn't have friends that went. It was just me. So he recognized early on that this was, thank you for asking that, because I never thought about it. But yeah, he obviously must have recognized early on that I'm someone who would do this. I mean, I think it was only 2 years in when he looked at me and he said, "I'm not going to be here on Tisha B'Av. You're going to read Eicha, right?" And okay. And now I also have to say, I arrived at Beth Sholom being able to read Torah. I was able to read an Or Shalom they taught me from a tape, from just a recording. And then Kenny Altman had a class in like 1999 on how to chant Torah, how to lane, which I took. So when I arrived at Beth Sholom in 2000, I knew that I was going to be laning there, and laning just totally immediately, just the connection to Torah in that really intimate way. Just, even though I would look at the English, so I knew what I was reading, but I didn't know what I was reading in the moment, right? But still, the chanting, the way it goes, that just called to me really, really deeply. And so he recognized that. And I also, the Makor Or thing was like a perfect thing for me, because I'd been looking for meditation, and there it was in my community. And so when the practice period was announced, I signed up immediately. And that was also how I got to Minyan, which, as many people know, is a practice that is extremely dear to me. And it's funny, a part of the practice period commitment was that you had to agree to go 2 or 3 times in the morning. You either went from meditation 6 to 7 next door. We had a house next door, which is now incorporated into the campus, but you went from meditation to Minyan, or there were a couple of days you went from Minyan to meditation. And I picked the 3 where you go from meditation to Minyan. And I started early because I had to make sure that I could get up that early in the morning, because at the time I was not a morning human being. So I started doing that. And I look at it now and I'm like, wow, my meditation practice is what it is now. My Minyan practice is over 20 years old. My Minyan practice has sustained me as a regular prayer practice through all sorts of things I've been through cancer, through, shul issues, through all sorts of things. It's been a very, very deep connection. And I think a place where I connect to prayer. And I will say that I have to say also that in this time of pandemic, of praying Minyan on Zoom, oddly enough, my prayer practice has gotten deeper. There's a different focus that has come up for me that has been really profound.
Yeah. Marilyn, thank you for giving us these these images and notions of Rabbi Lew, and I know that I want to bring in Rabbi Ain now because he's in the midst of doing Ain on Lew. I think that's what it's called, and I just know that he's his contribution, his what he brought and what he enabled the community around Beth Sholom to do was really special. And I know that Rabbi Ain has incredible reverence for him. And so I think this is a great time to bring in Rabbi Ain because I'm assuming he's got some juicy questions for you. So, Rabbi Ain, are you here still?
I don't know about juicy questions, but I'm definitely here. Just beautiful, Marilyn, to hear just the way that the spiritual practice sustained you. I think that's so important for people to know through difficult times in your life, to have that minyan practice, through all the chaos that goes on in our world, to have that spiritual practice to hold fast to. And I just love that you share that that's just such a source of solace and strength for you. And I think that that's what you try to give to so many people. And I admit I was really sad when I heard about your story of the potluck Passover Seder. It made me really sad because it's like, can we do that now? Like,
I was like saying, you're saying,
that seems like that's how community happens, with people getting their hands dirty and coming together. And I hope in the coming months and years that you and our community can get back to that collective effort of real human focus. It's just so beautiful. And it really is what makes community so strong. And it's what I think you brought to all of the communities you're a part of. Okay, now I do have what I want to say. I do have things I want to say. So first thing is, my father's story is so similar to yours. I mean, he literally came up in a home. They didn't keep kosher. It was not a religious home. And when he was 12, he went to shul by himself in Great Neck, which, by the way, it's cute. Adam is like, I think you referred to it as the city. Adam, there is only one, the city, by the way. It's like, they don't know that here, but the city is New York, right? Just in case that was unclear.
No, it's really funny because that's such a Long Island thing. It's Long Island and the city.
Exactly. And it's just beautiful how there was something, and you might have given God a little bit of credit there for having maybe taken you on a path. And I feel very similar. I feel blessed to have had a father who found refuge in a shul when he was young. The first time I ever saw my dad cry was at Rabbi Waxman's funeral. Rabbi Waxman was the great rabbi at Temple Israel in Great Neck. This story really just resonates with me. It feels so Hamish and feels like you're part of my mishpacha. What you really talked about now, this is my only question I have for you. It's like the sense that right now, and I feel it too, I would love to hear your take on it. You began by saying that right now, your words were, this is ripe for change that can really happen. And I just love if you can tell us why.
Because I think there's different tracks going on that can finally be in sync, is what I'll say. I think that traditional, authentic Jewish practice, which has sustained us for thousands of years, that I believe in this. One of the problems with 20th century Judaism is, I say that when I grew up, they tried to strip all the spirituality out of Judaism for us, like the no angel thing, right? There's no afterlife in Judaism. I mean, they were worried about the Eastern religions. So what they did, and I actually talked to friends of other religions, and it was across the board in the 60s. They stripped all that spirituality out, and they said, why do we do this? Because that's what we do. We've done it for thousands of years, and we lost all these people in the Holocaust, and now we have to keep doing it, and that's why. And that was the answer. You did not question. And unfortunately, and I think we will start looking at the Holocaust and the Shoah differently as well, because we need to look at the causes and not we have to do this because people died. I honor the people. I mean, I don't mean to be flippant about it. I teach Shoah. I think, and I know people who don't want to anymore. I think we need to bring it back, but in a different way. What I think is that real, authentic Jewish practice, which is extremely spiritual, but got lost. Translations got lost. If you look at the Sim Shalom, that's why we have Lev Shalem. okay, because they watered things down. There was a feeling in the 20th century that we have to water everything down to get people to come, and they didn't realize this. No. So I think we have an opportunity right now to both deepen, because people long to know and they want the connection. They don't know how to access it. Now we have teachings. We have people who can teach, people who can show. There's lots of outlets for it. And I think that we can claim a lot of that spirituality back, along with what it is to be in community. And that it's not exclusive. We're not like Jews in a shtetl, though I like the shtetl thing of, like, I think of each synagogues and communities as shtetl in a good way. Because I'm Gluckle of Hamlet. I'll travel all over the place, right? I love having little shtetls that I can go dip into. We can go lots of places, yet there's still a commitment. There's still things to go. And I think that those things are reaching people in different levels. I'm in Musar now. I'm learning the Musar tradition. It's blowing me away that I never knew about this, right? And it's Torah based. I mean, I'm reading, hold on, Misilat Yesharim, right? Lozano, crazy. And he speaks to me in a way that I'm like, I love this guy. He says in here, like, you pious people, he's talking to the Haredi. You pious people, you think just because you're pious, you got it? No, you got to have intention.
I hope people listen to you, because this is so important and it's so key to who we are as a people. Rabbi Akiva never picked up the Torah until he was 40. And like at any point in our lives, no matter what we've been through, no matter what age we are, we can turn on to Torah that can change our lives. And Marilyn, like, you're the greatest example of someone who just will continue to search and find it and just not let the barriers in the way. The one thing that's distinct from your experience and from my father's experience is he was a man. And so hearing your story, and like, he had the option to go become the rabbi that you didn't have. But it's so, you really touched me when you said, what was the answer? And I remember talking to my father when I was 14. I was, might be hard to believe, I was a sort of pugnacious, feisty kid, if you can imagine. And I said to him, I go, Dad, why are you waking up? He would wake up in the morning, go to shul, come back and eat, then go to the train station and take an hour 15 train into the city. Because you couldn't eat before minyan. I said, why every day he did this? Why do you do it every day? And the only answer he ever had for me was, because it's what you do. It was verbatim what you just said. And so that really speaks to me. So thank you for everything that you do, and that spirit and the wisdom that you have and your ability to bring community together. I pray that we have the opportunity to do that and to bring that to this community. So thank you for everything. All right, I'm going to head off.
Thank you, Rabbi Ain. Marilyn, I'm glad that you brought up the Musar, because I think that it would be remiss of me to not mention that you are studying Musar with my mother-in-law right now.
Your sister-in-law.
Yeah, with my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law. Yes, you are studying with both of them. And as Rabbi Ain said, you've constantly been searching. You're going deeper. That's what you think is our opportunity right now to go deeper. So tell us briefly, why is Musar speaking to you right now? And in short, like, what about Musar should people know, if in case they are not aware of what it is and how it's connecting to your Jewish identity?
Okay, I'll regel echad on one foot as much as I can. Musar itself is a Jewish spiritual pursuit, is the way I will describe it, that gives you tools, different intentions to be able to, one, exist in the world. For instance, what patience is savlanut, right? That's a Musar tool. But what does that mean? Being quiet, being introspective, pausing. They give you these very concrete ways of, in the moment, figuring out how you just live your life. But it also has an element of Torah, and it's ancient. I think one of the reasons it calls to me is it's not modern. It starts from like the 9th, 10th century, and it gets kind of revived every like 100 or so years. It comes back into fashion So this book I held up, Mishlach Yesharim, I mean, that's 1700s. You know, there's Rabbi Salanter at 1800s, right? There's, you know, there's what's happening, you know, now with Alan Morrison and the Center for Contemporary Musar, which is the program I'm in. It is tied to a practice. So Musar is both it's Rabbi Stone, who is the one who brought it to Beth Sholom last year, who is Rabbi Russell's rabbi. It is a discipline on many different levels. So it's a discipline because you do have to actively do something. It's a discipline because there are constraints. You do kind of work on things. It does tell you how to deal with things. And it's a discipline. It is a practice. It's all of those things. I mean, it is a philosophy. It's a discipline. It's a philosophy as well. So that, and you also, the other thing about Musar that's really important, the important element is you have to do it in community. You cannot do it on your own as a hermit. And the fact that there's practice, there's community, there's Torah. You have to study Torah. You also have to have avodah. You also have to have service to the community. So for me, someone who obviously, I mean, Torah is important to me, prayer is important to me, study is important to me. And as someone who is devoted to going to Glide and making that part of my spiritual practice, going to Glide in 2 mornings a week to help feed people who need food. All of those things are musar. Plus the added, the extra added bonus of getting a way of, again, dealing when things are not going right for you. You get this menu almost of how to, like, okay, let me step back. Let me take on someone else's burden and how I can help lessen my burden also by taking on their burden. It's very, very much a flow, because what I will say is one of the very, very core things about Musar is that you recognize that because you are created by however you want to have your God concept. If you don't want to call it God, whatever, transcendent or whatever, you are created. And because you are created and other people have been created as well, we are all in this together. And so that when you hit a situation, you need to think about that other person and think about what is their burden, how are they dealing with it? And then where does that bring me? And how do I have to take in that as well as my own, because if I'm not healthy, I can't help them.
Yeah. Well, Marilyn, what do you? I'm gonna ask you to think about this answer, because I'm gonna give you a bit of a boundary here. I'm gonna give you one sentence. Okay, I know that you are involved in not just Beth Sholom. You've been heavily involved in the kitchen. You are a seeker of spirituality wherever you may find it. And so, if you had a chance to say one sentence to Jewish leadership of institutions right now, of kind of the people who are executive directors, the people that are senior rabbis, what's one sentence you would say to them right now about what they should be thinking about the future of Jewish life in San Francisco and the Bay Area? What would you say to them? One sentence.
I would say, when you're leading a group in that way, you need to take into account where they are and find ways to bring them into the spiritual practice and not take your practice and try to force it upon them.
Mm-hmm. Great. Marilyn, I think this is a good lead into the speed round of questions. And that was a little bit of a segue to get you to come to some quick, short answers on a few questions. I ask all of our guests some of these, a variety of these, and are you ready for these speed round of questions?
Go for it.
Okay. You're on your path. What are 5 necessities that you must have with you?
A Tanakh, a Siddur, a Yad, a tallis, and tefillin.
Awesome. Thank you. And if you could walk the path with anybody, they can be living, they can be past, they can be a person as their future selves. Who would you like to walk the path with?
Man, I got a lot of people I could walk with.
You're allowed to say a couple. It's okay.
You know, on the male side, Rav Kook and Chofetz Chaim. Chofetz Chaim is someone who's a teacher from the 19th century, and both of them are kind of in the same realm. Aviva Zornberg and Rabbi Lou.
And what, do you have a favorite Jewish holiday?
Well, you know, I go for the smaller holidays. So Hoshana Rabbah, which is the end of Sukkot, is, and Sukkot in general is a favorite holiday of mine because it is, sorry, Rabbi Lou, it is the most pagan holiday ever. And I love the tie to our ancient roots.
Excellent. All right. And this is my final question. And you've kind of answered this throughout our conversation, but I'm going to give you another chance to kind of succinctly tell us what you think. What do you see ahead of you on the path?
Interesting, as I've just changed positions in certain levels. I am still always seeking ways to connect to people because I have finally accepted my calling that I am connected to people in varying ways, and I need to really like kind of just use that, or just kind of realize that and see what I can do. And in the concrete realm, I am planning on putting together a siddur, which I have done for the kitchen, as I've done a machzor. And I really think, especially a weekday morning to start, but I would like to put together a siddur that is completely accessible on varying levels, meaning transliteration as well as translation that can speak to people without blocks of hierarchy or gender. So that those are the things, and then just keep exploring, how do I teach more? How do I put out the way I'm able to take in this tradition and these teachings, and I am able to bring them out, and I want to figure out a wider way where I can reach out to people, because I have a way of doing that. And I am able to do that. And I just have to find the path and the methodology to do that.
Marilyn, anything else you want to share with us today?
Not really. I'm not about myself. I just really want to encourage people to really, be open-minded and really be open to be able to hear. As much as I say I need leadership to go out and reach out to people and see where they are, I want people also, when they're in their place, to be able to open up, hear what you need in your space, and feel free to really go there. And we are a people of questions. We are people of words, and we are people of questions. And I want to encourage people to dip into and answer, ask those questions and keep asking them. But you also need to truly and deeply listen to the answers that you get.
Marilyn, you have been an inspiration. I'm so grateful for your time and for your candidness, for your for just the way that you're true. You're true to who you are and what you believe, and it's refreshing these days. So thank you so much for allowing us to walk on your path with you today. And I can't wait to continue building Jewish life with you. I know that this is just the beginning for our relationship. And I know that we're planning to have you guide our daughter through her bat mitzvah experience. So I'm really excited that you will be a part of that. You're a blessing to all of us. And so I'm so grateful and I hope a lot of people watch this and hear what you have to say, because you're a true teacher, who sees the now, who sees the past, and who sees the future, and we would be lost, I think, without you around. So thank you, Marilyn. I'm just going to finish off with my closing. You can turn off your camera, but please hang out, because Rabbi Ain and I will chat with you for a minute after we stop the recording. Everybody, People on the Path is shared on the last Wednesday of each month. Please note that we are planning to skip September as we plan and prepare for the High Holy Days, but please keep your eyes and ears open for the next edition, which will be available on Wednesday, October 27th. I'd like to thank everyone for joining. I hope this conversation has been valuable and will support your efforts to find your footing and balance as you continue to navigate and blaze your path. One step at a time, I encourage you to walk your path with courage, wonder, curiosity, and, as Marilyn is a perfect example, with an open mind, body, and spirit. Shalom and Nisya Tova, safe travels as you explore. Bye, everybody.